My name's Tim. This is the last speech. It's my audience. Okay. Today I'm going to be talking about hydrogen fuel and why hydrogen is the best available alternate energy source. Of course, all images are from Google and they are not my own. I just want to make that disclaimer. According to the Los Alamos National Laboratory, hydrogen is the most abundant material in the universe. Everything organic is made up of hydrogen. They say it's about 90% of our total bodies, food, etc., water is made up of hydrogen. We're going to be talking why it's the best energy source, how we can make it, and how you guys can actually invest in this technology to help bring it to term. Credibility, I went to Miami University, which is a relatively big science school, also business. We had a technology called geothermal. When I went to the plant, I saw that they had grass on top and that they had probes into the ground that were using the temperature of the earth to actually heat the water and stuff. I became more interested in alternative energy sources. They were able to take 80% of that and power the school, and then 20% was the coal plant. So they were able to reduce their carbon footprint a lot. After that, I started researching more, and I became very interested in hydrogen as the ultimate fuel source. So why is hydrogen energy the best? Well, it's efficient, and you can use it like gasoline. So it's not something new that we have to learn. Where in a gas car you need 20 gallons of fuel, hydrogen is a lot lighter. It's also more dense and you can compress it more. So where 20 gallons of fuel, now you need 7 kilograms of hydrogen in the car. Per Forbes, and Forbes is a business website, but it's important. Once hydrogen is starting to become on the business radar, you're starting to see that people are seeing that they can make money off of this. Realistically, in a capitalist society, we're able to move more towards this technology. Hydrogen is only 1/3 of the volume of fuel, period. Like I said, 7 kilograms. So you can triple the distance of your vehicle. This is a hydrogen station. This is it can be produced on site. So at total, if you're looking at a gas station, now you're looking at a hydrogen refuel station. This is about the size of what you would need, and then this section right here is where you would refuel. Imagine just pumps sitting out here like this. So hydrogen, it can be produced on site. It does not need to be transported. We'll talk about why that is because of how we can make it. It allows for refuelability, so versus electric cars, you just plug your car in and pressurize your hydrogen tanks. And also, because of that 1/3, it's also by default 3 times more efficient than gasoline engines. So how can we make it? Well, steam methane reforming is the first method. And that stuff, basically you're taking methane, that's your carbon, that's your CO2, methane's a different gas, of course. The biggest producer of methane, which does pollute our environment and create global warming, is cows and beef production because we eat so much beef. So what's involved is you superheat this methane, and what it does is it separates the hydrogen atoms, which are collected, and then later on producing hydrogen fuel. It was discussed in Hordesky's ebook in 2008. This is another method, rather than methane, it's using something called urine. The cool thing about hydrogen is because it comes from organic sources, you can take anything and pull the hydrogen atoms off of it. And it's the most readily available fuel source in the world. Hydrolysis and photoelectrolysis. A study by Rittman in his journal in 2012, you can use solar panels to use electricity. So you can use alternate forms of energy to actually produce hydrogen. You don't need fossil fuels. So, of course, solar panels using the sun, but then there's also a method from Catalan in 2019, and that's a whole podcast, is you can create hydrogen from seawater. And then, of course, from the University of Southern California, there's just so many studies out there. You can produce hydrogen from a natural process. You don't even need electricity or the sun. You just use algae in the process of photosynthesis, totally natural. So the algae will absorb all the CO2 from the atmosphere. It'll absorb some of that toxicity, some of the carbon or hydrocarbons that we release in the atmosphere. It'll take it up, and then that excess CO2 will create more biomass, and through this process here, we can split that further, take that algae and split it further, and make oxygen and hydrogen separately. So, Chatham in 2015, this is also another podcast. Another cool thing is we had algae blooms like up in Flint, stuff that's toxic to dogs, animals, and people. He investigated a method in which you can actually take drones and you can clean toxic algae out, and then you can turn around and use that toxic algae to produce biomass and thus hydrogen fuel. So it's a constant loop of where all this fuel is coming from. Another method is carbon capture. This is interesting. It has to do with, for example, airplanes. They can attach this carbon capture technology on airplanes, and as they're flying through the sky, they can collect all this carbon. When they come back, they can also take what they collected, make it into jet fuel, and it's just a constant process. So Stanford, the school, did the research and actually came up with this carbon capture technology. This is just a general overlink of carbon capture technology, i.e. the machines that would capture the carbon, and then of course it would convert that energy to generalized usage. So just for an example, there's always a trade-off with some things, but if you capture 90% of the carbon dioxide, your output increases by 80%, your power output increases by 80% over coal, and the cost of electricity might increase by 33%, but the pollutants decrease by 78%. So what that does essentially is makes a cleaner environment. So we might pay a little more at first, but as the technology develops, we presume that would go down. So I know I just threw a lot at you. This is generally what I talked about. In hydrogen can be produced in so many different ways. You can use natural gas, you can use oil, so you don't need to cut it out completely. There can be a nice clean transition from fossil fuels to alternate, and we can go into, like, Germany uses wind power and solar power to create their hydrogen. They're getting rid of all their nuclear power plants. Sewage treatment, we can use our feces and our urine to take hydrogen out of what's already there. We can ferment it and create more biomass, and through creating a biomass, we can also take hydrogen from that. There's so many different methods being studied now. So we talked about why hydrogen technology is the best, how we can make it, and now how can we make this possible? Well, of course, through the government, right? R&D research. R&D money has improved so much that you are already seeing batteries on, like, Tesla's going from $500 per kilowatt hour to now 264 kilowatt hours. So we need to push for more infrastructure changes, and that's something like looking at who your politicians are changing. Incentivizing alternate energy purchasing, and of course, pushing us. Something that we can do directly is we can personally invest on stuff like Robinhood stocks. We can invest as retail investors to these companies directly. So you don't even have to go through politicians, just invest in the company, and as they grow, you'll get a return on your money. It's easy to talk about it, but how can we visualize what's happening here? Well, there's already hydrogen vehicles on the road. In fact, that's the car that you more than likely have seen. Mostly California uses hydrogen fuel cell energy, but also buses in major cities are doing this. So they're already on the road, and as a comparison between electric and hydrogen, we see if you go on a 1,000-mile road trip, if you have a hydrogen fuel cell vehicle, your downtime for refueling is 59 minutes. And you probably only spend $90. But over 1,000 miles, electric requires 5.5 hours to charge and costs $40, so you're still spending money on that electric. Okay, and here are my references and my cited sources. In conclusion, we talked about why hydrogen is the best technology, what it is, and how we can do it. And there's my audience. Thank you for coming.